Welcome, listeners. We are back again with another episode for you. Remember, during when we were growing up, we always often heard that whatever seed we sow today, that's what gonna be reaping tomorrow, and that's what we are going to be discussing today. As how much of a garden that we have sowed is shaped by our choices, and how much is determined by something deeper, perhaps our inherent design. And today, in our journey toward wellness and self improvement, we often face questions that go beyond the physical. What drives our decisions? Why do we feel stuck in certain areas of life? How can we align ourselves with a path that feels both fulfilling and authentic? Spirituality often have many answers, but translating them into actionable insights is where the actual challenge lies. And our guest today, Lauren Fedak, is a guide with a profound understanding of human design, gene keys, and Akashic records. Her mission is to help individuals connect with their authentic selves and live in alignment with their true nature. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Same here, Lauren. Human design is a very new topic for me, and I'm really excited to, understand all the 3 points, all the three topics that you have been enabling people out there with. So, before we start and dive into understanding what human design, gene keys and Akashic records hold, why don't you share your journey and what introduced you to all the three verticals?
Sure. So the quick version of the story is when I had my first child, I was 29 and I essentially kind of lost my sense of self, didn't really understand anymore the purpose for me other than, yes, it's being a mom, but I felt a stronger connection to self for the loss of self. I felt that that was missing once I had my child. And I grew up in a household that, I went to Catholic school, but didn't necessarily practice or follow that religious construct. So when I did have a child, I felt like I was totally at loss and really had no faith whatsoever at that point. And I really kind of broke down and had this postpartum moment where I just knew I needed help. And that's when I started to kind of get into looking into therapy, talk therapy, and then I then started to dabble just on social media and kind of discover this whole realm of spirituality, which was totally new to me. I've heard of it before, and it was kind of when you're brought up in a certain way, you kind of look at spirituality as like this quote unquote woo woo out there. You think of like the darker magic or like the voodoo type of thing. And when I just started to kind of go down that road of like, what does all of this actually mean? And how is this like, I actually resonate with this information. I resonate with these messages. And I stumbled upon all different things, whether it be tarot cards, past life regression, astrology, numerology is like a whole other world that I dove down into. And then I found human design. And like, that's when I'm like, okay, this is what I like. This totally speaks to me. And it's probably one of the most complex tools, I feel like, most intricate, most nuanced, because there's so many different layers. It's definitely Mary Poppins bag of all the things, and you can interpret it in so many different ways, which my brain likes. My brain's very much, I love being in the clouds and I love my imagination, but I also like being grounded and being strategical. And I feel like human design gave me that practicality to that spiritual element or to the esoteric aspect of things. So when I discovered human design after maybe, I would say, like 6, 7 months after my first was born, that's when I really started to go inward and really understand this modality on top of understanding the gene keys that came after that. And then later on, coupled with the Akashic Records, was kind of how it all came to be. So it really was because of my firstborn opened me up to this whole world and on this path to self-discovery.
Wow, that's an invigorating journey, and kudos to you, to be navigating it through. Um, you mentioned that you went through a lot of different paths out there, numerology, astrology. How did you really define, or how can any individual out there really define that this particular path speaks to me, or this is something that I should be heading towards? Because all of us are, totally unaware of the power or, gaps that each of these practices might have. Now, how do I really get my answer? Many people might not have the luxury of time and money investment to try all through. So, what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I think that it's also very saturated and it can become very overwhelming, and very overstimulating too. Because we could, especially if you're in a position where I felt like I was totally desperate to find the answer outside of myself. And I was investing not only my time, but financially, just to, having other people tell me, my path or my destiny. And I feel like this kind of ties nicely into just human design and understanding the things that actually light you up. So when I say human design speaks to me, it was a visceral reaction that I had in my body. I felt like I could learn this information for eons. Like I could just keep going on and on. Whereas the other tools that I discovered and that I went and I had readings done, they were kind of quick fixes. They weren't something that I felt like I could really sink my teeth into, but it felt good at that time, quote unquote, because it's like, oh, I have an answer, but I feel like I need more. So I think that trial and error is good, like especially if you're starting to dabble into all these different modalities. I think definitely explore. But if it's speaking to you, or if you find one that you feel is like your access point into your true self-discovery path, I I feel like being able to listen to your authority, or really like following your strategy, and we can talk about that in human design. I feel like that will accelerate you quicker and align you quicker to that tool or that modality that is best for you and what your soul needs at that time. Because it could be all the different things, just at different point in times. But I feel like for me, human design has been the constant over the past 4 or 5 years, where it's really been something that I'm continuously learning day in and day out, and that true joy of wanting to learn and seeing how I experiment with it in real life. That's how I know this is something that is always going to be in my toolbox and I'm always going to have. And that is truly one of my callings for sure.
But again, Lauren, often, that time part, I totally understand that people do need to experiment with things. That's only when they, realize what's really calling them, what they're calling out there. Uh, but one thing that becomes a biggest hurdle out there is the cost factor, the function of cost out there. On one aspect, I do understand the, providers of these modalities have to earn their bread and butter. So I cannot be expecting them to be either, doing it for free or at very dirt cheap prices. But on the other hand, most of the seekers out there don't have that affordability factor coming in. They often would only have the affordability to go for one or two modalities at max, and then they have to settle down with whatever answers they're able to discover after going through that round of consultation or conversations with the respective path that they have chosen. So what could be a better approach out here, or let's leave it just to destiny? What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts is always go within first and foremost. So I do think that when you're starting out, it's going to take a lot of cultivating that patience, aka sitting in meditation, resisting the urge or the feeling of needing to do X, Y, and Z. Because that's the thing. I think when you start to feel like you need to engage in something or you need to purchase something to give you the answer, that's when I feel like, is that a need or is that a want? Because I think that following the want is actually more fulfilling, as well as it will provide you more versus than that need. Because when you're going after something because of need, it's because you're feeling this lack that at the end of the day, I mean, as you and I both know, the answers are always within. It's just having that patience to cultivate it in a way where we can sit in silence and truly tap in. And this is something I think that is very much I think just important in general is the journaling aspect and understanding first and foremost. Ask yourself the questions that you are going to ask this other person or this other tool, what you're really seeking. Ask yourself first. See what you have to say and start to identify if it's kind of that ego coming in and being like, well, I don't have this, so I have to make sure I have X, Y, and Z. So this is why I need it. I think when you start to figure out those keywords, again, the biggest one being need, I think that is something that you can quickly discern if you really need to invest your time into something, or if it's really something that you can answer yourself. So I think that it's more of sitting in silence, doing the work for yourself, aka meditation, journaling, figuring out what it is you're really seeking, what it is you're really struggling with. And not a lot of people like to do this, because I think this goes back to when I was looking for answers outside of myself. I didn't want to go within because I didn't want to disrupt anything or past memories that may be lying stagnant, and waiting to upheaval itself. That really, those are the answers within. Those are the reason why I felt so desperate. The reason why I felt so lost is really because I really never lived necessarily in alignment, or as truly authentic as I possibly could, because of all the societal norms or the conditioned beliefs and all the experiences that I've had, and that my mind is labeled good and bad. So I think that that's hard work that a lot of us don't necessarily like to do, as it relates to a lot of reflection and going within and finding the answers within. So I do think that, one, it's a lot of sitting in contemplation and meditation to find your own answers. I don't think that anybody needs any of this. I think that this is a support, and we're here to assist, and we're helping, at the end of the day, uplift everyone. But we don't necessarily need this. So I think that, again, sitting in silence, being able to figure out your own answers, as well as getting involved in, identifying your circles, I think is another big one, that you can do right away, and kind of see where you feel you are being your most authentic self, where you feel like you're expressing yourself fully, where you feel as though you're not necessarily diluting yourself. Kind of take an assessment, of where you're putting yourself in different environments, or being able to change those up to bring in individuals that you can learn from their stories. We're all sharing these things because they're based off of our experience, and that's what we're meant to do, to share and be able to help inspire, to help people discern quicker, to learn from someone else's quote unquote mistakes or experiences. So I think that being able to shift yourself in different circles and getting involved in the community in some way, shape, or form, like that, in a spiritual community, or it doesn't have to be spiritual, but it's definitely being able to change up your external world as you're working on your internal world. And I feel like you'll be able to see that as within, so without. So those are like the two things that I guess really come to mind right now, that is free and accessible and anybody can do.
Totally agree on that. Working on the external of your external world is really important. Just to share an anecdote from my own journey, when I started my journey of entrepreneurship, I used to often feel that anything that's happening bad is happening only with me. I am at fault that I'm not able to, deliver to the utmost satisfaction of my clients. The moment I started moving out in the different circles and different communities, started meeting more business people or entrepreneurs out there, I realized and I observed it's same with everyone out there. Everybody has a client or two that's not happy with their services or products. However, best to try to do, there is going to be somebody whom you're not able to, satisfy or make happy. So that's where that acceptance started coming in me. And, I evolved from there, accepting it. Okay, I have to do my best. I have to give my 100%. I need to ensure that I am able to look myself in the mirror. After that, it's all up to the client. We have evolved our processes. We have evolved a lot of things. But yes, the anxiety that used to be within me at the start of my entrepreneurial journey has reduced drastically. And now with the help of processes I have built, it really supports me in my journey and in serving the client to the satisfaction. And just one last
Mm.
point on that, expectation setting really got to me. That's one concept I realized this year, 2024, that you have to ensure before starting a project, you need to do a very solid foundation of expectation setting when you're working with a client. So those are the things that have really helped by going out in the community. And to be honest, as you shared, you have to be open. You have to be vulnerable a bit to get back that strength, to earn that strength within you, build that strength within you. Because unless you're not vulnerable, people are not going to be vulnerable to you. They will not share their experiences, and you will have nothing to learn. You can learn a bit by observing, but yes, you learn a lot by sharing as well.
Yes, you have to do that exchange and that engagement, and that communication. We're all here to express ourselves. We're all here to vocalize our experiences, to give our suggestions, to do all those things. And I think that it allows, when you're doing that, you start to feel more comfortable and as a byproduct more confident in being yourself and continuously doing the work, because we're on this lifelong journey of really this discovery and really being able to express ourselves in a way that we are compassionate, and above all show and emanate love to everyone, to receive that. We have to give before we receive. So it's a very much, I do feel like, being able to get in those circles, being able to express yourself and to share in a vulnerable way, because like you said, we all are going through it. It just might look a different way,
Yep.
but the feeling and the experience is exactly the same. So we're all mirrors for each other in that way. So express, share, show your vulnerability, because that is your greatest strength.
Yep, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. Coming on to the main topic, human design. Can you help our
Mm.
listeners understand what exactly is human design?
Very, very complex system. But nonetheless, this gentleman, Ra Uru, who he channeled the work actually over the course of like 7 or 8 days back in the 70s. And essentially, it's taking these ancient modalities as well as like quantum physics or biochemistry, things like the I Ching, the Kabbalah or the Tree of Life, the Zodiac, aka astrology, chakra systems, and again coupling with this quantum mechanic and being able to map out these energies that actually you possess, that your essence works through. So really, human design is this map, or this graph where you can literally see from a tangible perspective the powers and the gifts that you actually hold, and that you're here to express, and how uniquely you are, because not one person's chart is the same. Granted, there are twins. However, their expression will be different. So no matter what, you are playing out your expression uniquely you. So it shows you how individualized you actually are, as well as understanding that every single chart, there's no one chart that is better than the next. I want to preface that because I think there's a lot of people that can see their chart and be like, oh, I don't have that much definition or color or activation within it. Mine's kind of more white and undefined, where those white areas, you're more susceptible for other people's energy. Whereas when you're defined, you're more of an influencer. So there's no one chart that is better than the next, but it shows how we all need each other to actually activate all of the gifts that we all possess and that we all hold. So yes, on one side, it's very much see how unique you actually are and who you came here to be, because there was never any one person like you or will be like you. And then, on the other hand, it's very much see how collaborative we are, how every single human being is really a co-creator with one another, and how we can help strengthen these gifts that we all possess. So it's basically this map that kind of shows you your energetic blueprint and how you are meant to operate in the world and experience these energies through different relationships, through different types of experiences personally. So it's considered your nature, not your nurture. So your chart will show you your nature aspect to you, your energies, but it will not, describe to you that one time when you were little and you went to your grandparents' house, so on and so forth. That's the nurture. That's the societal programming or the conditioning that we get from our parents, our friends, school, and any types of environments we put ourselves in.
Can you bring in some instances to help our listeners understand a bit more about human design? Like there would be different factors coming in. So how does it reflect in their innate natures? The way they behave or the way they perceive things or the way they approach things. So if there could be some
Yes.
examples of these things.
Yes. So the major things to understand in one's chart is definitely your type, your strategy, and your authority. So there's 5 types that make up the world's population, and these types are essentially your aura and how you bring in, or how you're meant to again move through the world. So being able to understand if you are a manifester, manifestors are really here to initiate things, or they have a very closed and repelling aura. They're very much an energy that's here to be protected in a way of they're going to run with their ideas and they're really meant to make an impact quick. Whereas you have the generators and manifesting generators, they're both big auras where they're opening and enveloping and they're constantly pulling things in. And then they're really kind of like the builders or the alchemists, especially generators. Generators are that A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So these type of people really want to be able to do all the steps, where say like a manifesting generator, they're kind of this hybrid between a manifester and a generator. So they have a little bit of initiator in them, but they also want to jump around the steps. They want to make things more efficient, build the bridges, but that could be, I speak to, for myself and some of the other Manny gens in my world. It's kind of, we definitely have some wormholes that we end up going down, or that we miss steps, because we're here to really move quick and to try to build as fast as we can. So there's pros and cons, to every energy type. But essentially, generators are really kind of like these builders. They have the life force energy within them to be able to continuously do things that they absolutely love and do it in a sustainable way. And then you have projectors that are really focused and absorbing and really here to penetrate. They're kind of like the project managers or the orchestrators of all the types. They can really see kind of, what needs to take place. And then you have the reflectors. These are the ones that have no, centers that are within your chart, they're white and they're undefined. So they're the mirrors. They're actually the most rare. I think there's like maybe 1%, 2% in the world's population at this time. Whereas the projectors are around 20%, the generators / mini gens, they're about 70. And then you got the manifestors that are around like 8 or 9, I think, right now. So they're the main energy types. And within those energy types, you have your profiles, which kind of describe, the character that you're here to play. And then within that, you have your strategy and authority. And your strategy is, and your strategy is based on your type, and your authority is where you're really meant to make decisions. So it's human design. Another thing is really meant to take you from making decisions from your mind to dropping into your body, to allowing the mind to be the mind in terms of, calculating, understanding data, and past events, but not to be the predictors or the decision makers in situations, especially those bigger situations. So understanding where you are meant to make your decisions within your body as well. And there's also your incarnation cross, there's main themes that show up. It's a very intricate system, but primarily, definitely, understanding your type, your strategy, and your authority is essentially all that you need. Everything else, if you're following your strategy and authority, you don't need to understand everything else, because you're always going to be in alignment. You're always going to move, and opportunities that are meant for you and that are aligned for you will come to you quicker, versus when you're kind of resisting how you're meant to move or how your energy works. It's a little bit harder. You start to feel those challenges, or you start to have, those limiting belief systems that really kind of stifle how your energy is meant to move. You'll start to notice that not self theme in your chart. So I hope that kind of sums it up a little bit.
It does give a little bit of insights. So, I went through the free human design, chart that's available on your website, and most of it was sort of rocket science to me. There were a lot of symbols that I really could not, make out of anything. For me, it came out to be a manifesto. So I went through it, and I was going through it again today as well, I guess after a month. And I could observe a little bit of alignment between energy chakras and human design. So if you can, shed some light on that, and probably then, if you allow, I would like to ask few of the questions from my human design so that listeners could understand.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I forgot that you're a manifestor. Yeah, because you pulled that chart a little while ago. So yeah, so with the chakras itself, so what it's taking the chakras, there's 9 in the body graph. We understand the 7, the Hindu, the chakra systems. But in human design, they're actually taking 9. So those ones, so when you're looking at your human design, and you're looking at those geographic shapes, you will see that some are defined, aka colored in, and some are open. So where you are defined, that energy center is always on for you. Meaning the energy, the numbers that are found within your energy centers that are activated there, that's a sub theme to that main center itself. So having that always be on, aka funneling that energy, that personality or that behavioral trait that you hold, that's constantly accessible for you. Whereas where you see energy centers that aren't necessarily defined, it just means that it's not always on, meaning you either have kind of like understanding the planetary alignments when those are activated, as well as whoever you're around. Like when you're around myself, we activate each other in different areas of our chart that then activate certain channels, meaning it's a flow, a constant stream of energy that we're able to tap into, and that we're able to express through. So this is the part where it's, you see that you're uniquely defined, but then when you're with someone, it's being able to access more of your natural self or your innate being in a more easeful way, depending on if we are, in alignment to that energy, or, if we're acting in the detriment, so to speak. And also think about, these energy centers, or these gates as they're defined, that are in your energy centers. Think of them as like it's just an energy on a spectrum. You're either kind of vibing high with it, or you're vibing low, depending on maybe the emotions that you're feeling that day, or maybe again, like the environment that you're in, or who you're around. Everything, it's not concrete, it's not absolute. You're constantly oscillating from different sides of the spectrum within the energy centers that you have. But the ones that are defined for you, you can easily tap into. They're always on for you.
So can you let me understand? I got the profile to be 4 by 6. It said that if I'll just refer it once again to be exactly, yeah. So it says that I'm a opportunist 4 and a role model 6. So what exactly does it mean?
Yeah, it's when I think about your profile and your type, you're very much aligned to what you're doing here. So the 4 is considered the opportunist in traditional human design terms, but it's also known as the networker. So you really value your circles. You really value your people within the circles that you have. You're probably super selective who you let in your friend group or where you immerse yourself in, because that 4 is a very foundational line for you. That means that you identify with that and you feel safe making opportunity, or having, opportunities present themselves within your network. And if you start to reflect, kind of on your past lives, so to speak, just in the past, where your opportunities came from, and if they came within a circle, or someone who knows someone who knows someone, or maybe there's references, things like that, it's very healthy for you to work within your networks and to find opportunity within your networks there, because it gives you a sense of security. And then that 6th line, that's more on the unconscious side of you, whereas the 4 line is more conscious. The 6th line is unconscious, and this is kind of how people see you. So the 6th line takes on kind of 2 roles. So in the first 30 years of life, it's a very experimental role. So being experiential with how you learn, or just who you're around, or life bumping into you, you bumping into life, taking on this role where you are discerning very quickly, again, making bonds or breaking bonds, so to speak, committing to something or not committing to something. And then that back half of your 30 years, or excuse me, 30 to 50 and 50 and beyond, essentially. It's weird how it's broken up into 3 different categories, but nonetheless, after your 30s, you become more discerning of just like your decisions, who you want to be around. And then you kind of work into this because you've experimented so much, or because you've experienced life in a very unique way. When you do become that 50 and beyond benchmarker, you're going to have a lot of people, if you don't notice it already, because it doesn't have to happen at that age, but you're going to start to notice a lot of people are coming to you because you've really been there and you've done that. So a lot of people see that role model, or that way shower, if you will, over time, come to you. So like taking on that aspect, as well as understanding that you are a networker and that it's very healthy for you to be selective with your groups and individuals. That is kind of the character that you've come here to play on your conscious side, your personality, your brain, and then on your unconscious side, which is more so your body, how your body moves. So those 2 elements, make up your profile and the character that you're here to play.
Okay. Now, since you have decoded it, I could align and relate to it a lot. So whatever you said about both the networker, the role model, I could
Yeah.
see instances from my life coming in. The previous 30 years, I'm 31 right now, and the previous 30 years, yes, probably from when I was 17 years to 30 years, I had a lot of
Mhm.
experiments going on. I had a lot of invigorating experiences out there. I do miss them at times. But yes, now somewhere or the other, my decisions are such which are more stable in nature, or I'm more contented with things that are happening now. Okay, I've experienced this, I have observed, I've learned from it. I need to be moving in this direction now. And for me, a lot of opportunities, yes, have come through my network. I love to network. If I would say that something that's comes to me naturally after content, like content is I would say that's my superpower. If I would have to describe my skills under superpowers, so networking would be the second superpower I would have. And I often boast it and proudly say it as well to some of my friends. Let me know the person you want to connect with. 90% is that's a guarantee. I would be able to reach that person either today or in a month's time. I can do that through my
Yeah.
network. So yeah,
Yes.
I could relate to
Yes.
it.
And knowing that too, like knowing that you are meant to be that that force and be that connector of sorts, it's very healthy for you to that in a way that's very discerning to you. Like now knowing, I've been there, I've done that. I really don't want to, experience that again. Whether again that be situational or with people, and not having to feel forced to stick something out, especially when it's like, I don't really want to do it. That's kind of, again, being able to live in alignment. Now you know that, and it is healthy for your energy to move that way. There's all other, elements to consider within your chart too. But for, the profile is one of the biggest things, as well as obviously your type and your strategy. But the profile, if you're moving in the way that your profile is, you're definitely going to be able to align a lot quicker as well.
So I guess that sort of answers my question. I had written on a question while you were explaining my chat. Can human
Mhm.
design really help an individual in deciding their career path?
In short, yes. I don't want to say that it defines, what you're only allowed to be or what you only should pursue. However, if we look at your design holistically and understand the way your energy likes to work, so you're a manifester. So being probably in a position where you can make uh, impact, like you have a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom to create something that you want to create. So given that space, given being in a career where you're allowed to run free, to create and to do it in a very quick way, but also have variety down the road, because manifestors, you're really here to start things, to make the impact, but you're not necessarily, your energy doesn't want to keep sustaining that, lifelong. It can get bored. It wants to be inspired by something else to push through that wall and make that impact again. So being able to create in a way where you can have a big impact in an organization or can contribute to a large portion of it, and then be able to maybe work on a different segment within the company as well at some point, looking for those signs where you have that versatility later on, is very healthy for your energy, because it also, you have a motor. I should ask, so do you know what your authority is? Does it say? Are you able to see that?
Emotional authority.
Okay, okay. So your emotion. So I'm an emotional authority too. So being able to understand your authority and how you make decisions within your career is also very helpful. So with an emotional authority, for example, we are people that are always generating emotions. We're always emoting emotions outwardly. We're the influencers in the room when it comes to emotions. For example, my husband doesn't have his emotional solar plex defined. So he can feel, even if I'm not aware of my emotions or how I'm coming across, he can pick up on it like that because he's more open in receiving those, and he amplifies it back. So he may seem more quote unquote emotional than I do. But so since we're always generating emotions, when we make decisions, being able to understand that, not making decisions when we feel emotionally high or emotionally low. So giving some time in between before committing to something and before making a decision in something to pursue within our careers, within our relationships or personal lives. That's really big too. So again, going back to just knowing that you're a manifester or knowing your type and being able to align to jobs, whether it be job statuses, like a contractor role would probably be great for a manifester because you can be versatile, and it could be short-term projects because your emotional solar plex is also considered a motor. So you have these spurts of energy probably at times where it could be 2 weeks you're totally on, and then you're like, oh, I need like 2 weeks to recover. Like I need some downtime. You could feel totally opposite. So you have a great amount of energy that wants to expel quickly in a big chunk of time, but then it needs that recovery time. So you need the rest. So being in a job where you're not, 9 to 5, always on, say like somebody for a generator or a manifesting generator, our energy is more inclined to be susceptible to those because we can sustain it. There's always the caveat, like, are you enjoying your job? But that's obviously another thing. But just knowing, the types of status, of your job, and then the type of work that you're doing within your job with your type and your authority or your motors is really, I think, helpful in having human design guide you to the positions that would best align to your energy.
Now a lot of things are making sense to me. Uh, I'm going to be asking one final question on my own human design chart. But yeah, for our listeners, they can definitely go and download their human design chart. We'll be putting the link in the description. Uh, I'm just going to come on final point where it says defined, undefined. So for me, it says that my G center is undefined and my heart center is defined. So what does it exactly mean?
Yes, yes. Okay, so your G center is considered your identity center. This is what where maybe you feel if it's undefined, there's maybe this direction that is more fluid for you, like where what am I? Maybe if you think when you're younger, what am I going to be when I grow up, or being in certain situations of like, well, I'm with this group of people and I can really see myself being like this, or maybe if I'm with another group of people, I can really see myself being like this. So the G center is really here to pull us in the direction of where we're going. And if you are undefined, you are essentially a chameleon. And this probably works wonderful as a 4 in your profile because you can adapt to certain situations. You can blend in, you can understand, you can feel, maybe that the direction or the environment in which you're in. Where somebody that has a defined G center, which I have, it's not to say that we can't be chameleons, but it's a little bit more intentional, a little bit more focused, and it's not as flexible. So kind of knowing quote unquote where I'm going, or where I want to put myself in a situation, I'm a little bit more fixed. I'm a little bit more one track mind in a way, if you will. Whereas someone that has an open G center, and this goes to all open centers, you're just more fluid. You're trying on everybody else's energy and giving and amplifying that back to other people. And then when you're away from that energy, it's kind of like you're relieving that energy and knowing that you've tried it on, but that's not necessarily you. And this is where understanding, are you adopting this as your own, or is this really someone else's? So that's where like discernment comes in and really understanding these types of energies. But the open center is really just allowing you to be a chameleon within your network space. And then your heart center, it's also referred the ego center. This is where the drive or the willpower or your desires come from. So yours is defined, correct? It's colored in.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of willpower. You have a lot of like wanting to be able to contribute to a tribe, or be able to be that resourcer. And depending on the gates or the numbers that are defined, kind of exemplifies what type of desire or willpower you specifically possess at all times. So having that defined, you're very fixed. You have a way that you're able to consistently show up as it relates to delivering to something, so that's very consistent within you. So I have my will center undefined, or my heart undefined. So I'm constantly kind of like experiencing other people's desires and feeding into those and taking them on as my own. And this is actually an example for me where I was really having to come to terms with, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Or is this because I love the dream that this person has and I want to help contribute, but I also know that I have something within that I want to do as well. So with your desire or with your heart center, it's really a place where it's like understanding your decisions and understanding what you want to commit yourself to. Does it meet your desires, aka does it benefit you, and does it benefit your tribe? Does it benefit the person? Does it benefit the environment? Understanding that you need a win-win to be like in alignment, because it's not a selfish center by any means. When we think of ego, it's like we think of the negative aspect to it, but really it's for your own desires and your own passions as well, that you need to that is wants to be driven and manifested into the world.
I guess I'm going to make a full stop over there. Probably would connect with you offline to understand my human design in more depth. Uh, but
Awesome.
I heard you at a lot of instances mention the impact of either us on those in our surroundings or vice versa as well. So I'm not going to go very far off in this. But yeah, two probable very close relations that every individual out there mostly, shares in their lifetime. One is with their spouse, and secondly, primarily the first major part of their life is with their parents. So if you can, first pick up on the how our spouse's human design impact us and vice versa, if you can discuss that followed by I have a lot of questions around parent-children dynamics on human design. So, but yeah, if we can start with the
Yes.
relation between human designs of spouses.
Yes. This I feel like is so important for people to understand just how they energetically show up, to the people that they're surrounded with. If we're talking specifically about spouses right now, I will take my example. So when I understood my human design, or was starting to understand my human design, and then I looked at my husband's human design, and then what you can do is you can actually kind of put them together or line them up together. There's a whole bunch of software out there that does that, or different apps that do that. You can see energetically how you're both showing up together. So this is again going back to the centers. I feel like it's the most important aspect to understanding how your relationship is. So understanding where you're defined or where you're undefined, and being able to give grace to that other person for being themselves, even when you're trying to understand or it doesn't feel necessarily good to you, because that energy is not always within you or accessible to you. So for instance, the biggest thing that I always can identify with when it relates to my husband is that his head center, both head and ajna. So your head is where is the inspiration center. And then there's again, gates within it. And then in the lower head center, it's the ajna. So we're processing, conceptualizing things. He has those two head centers defined. So there is constant mental pressure. He's living in his own world mentally. It's constantly wanting to figure out the energies, or understand whatever's coming through on his own. And there's something in human design, if we're talking about the Kabbalah or the tree of life, that element within human design, it's when you look at your chart and you see the lines and where things are connected. There's those are called circuitries. So depending on where you're highlighted within your circuitry, it's the energy that's more collective, the energy that's more individual, it's more tribal, or it's more integrative. So it depends, again, this is where the nuance comes in. But understanding that he not only is processing things mentally over and over again, there's a constant mental pressure in there. And understanding that I'm open, so I'm susceptible to that mental pressure, or like being influenced by those mental pressures. So mine is, so since it's open, it's kind of like, things can go in one ear and out the other type of thing, or like I can watch paint dry and be inspired. Nothing, you know, really, I don't have a fixed way of processing information, or and to that detriment, I can kind of have like an uncertainty to my thought process, whereas my husband can have absolute certainty. So being in a conversation and understanding, especially with this type of work, when he first discovered that I was doing all this, and trying to explain this to him, and him knowing, like now, knowing that he has his own way of processing information, it has to be very individualized and experiential for him before he gets it and before he understands it. It's when I'm talking to him, having that, that grace, and that level of patience and understanding that his energy is working differently than mine when understanding this type of information or this type of experience that I want to go experience. He's not going to understand why, because he, well, first and foremost, has to come to his own conclusions and can't be told what to do, because he has to make up his own mind. He's not susceptible for kind of influence, outside influence. He's the influencer in this area. So understanding where you're showing up as an influencer and where you're showing up as a receiver, I think is highly valuable, because not only for yourself and accepting yourself, but it'll cultivate a lot of acceptance, with your partner, with your spouse, whomever you're around. And being able to talk about these things obviously together would be ideal, but for the most part, if you can just understand, like if with my mom, and my parents, we don't necessarily have conversations around this, but I know their energetic makeup. So it allows me, knowing that my mother is a projector and knowing that she also has mental pressure all the time happening, knowing that she needs to speak out loud. I always used to question, why is she always talking to herself? I don't understand. I'm never going to be like that. Knowing that it's healthy for her to speak out loud, for her to hear it, and for her to process it her own way, it allows me to kind of just be at ease with it, or not have such an emotional charge to that relationship. Same with my husband and everybody else that I'm around, essentially, and that I have connections to.
So probably, Lauren, I would like to understand, like in our Hindu culture, we often create something that we call as Kundali. Over here, it's more or less an astrological chart, depending on the planetary positions during the time of our birth. and probably I might not be the right person to explain it in a very elaborate manner. But yeah, as far as I understand it, it's more about what was the planetary positions at the very time of your birth, at the place you were
Mm,
born. Now, if I remember it correctly, when I was going for downloading the human design chart through your website,
yeah,
it did ask me my time of birth, my location of birth, and my date of birth.
yes.
And I got the final output as a human design. So, what's the impact of these three factors in defining the human
Mm.
design for an individual?
Absolutely, good question. So when you're looking at your chart, you're going to see a side of your chart that says personality, and then you're going to see another side of your chart that says design. So the personality should be probably on the right-hand side, and then the design is on the left-hand side. So the reason why it needs your date of birth, your time, and your location is because it's taking the astrology elements and mapping it out accordingly from the moment that you're born, aka that's your personality side. So the things that you're conscious to, the thing that your mind thinks that you are. So being able to understand the moment that you're born, the planetary alignment, and the neutrinos, which is the most abundant particle in the universe, and that's where you see, like, if you look at your personality sun sign, the top element in your personality chart, the circle with the dot, and there's a number there, and then there's a point, whatever number next to it. That's from the neutrinos. That's the information, because neutrinos carry information along with its mass. So that type of information that's correlated, that gets transmitted through your DNA essentially. That's because the stars, aka the sun's always pushing off neutrinos, and we're constantly being imprinted, every so many minutes, whatever it is. And there's different things that get imprinted on us. So the moment that you're born, that's when that gets calculated. And then 88 days prior to your born, again, where the planets are aligned, what neutrinos are being passed off from those planetary or from the planetary planets, and that's considered the unconscious side. So again, being able to calculate that, think of it like if you're in your going into your third trimester, it's kind of like having an understanding of what impressions is being placed within your DNA at that time as you hit that trimester, and then the moment that you're born, what is more impressions that are being transmitted. And that's how it couples, and it creates that quantum human design. It creates that unconscious side to you and that conscious side to you. And that's all from the neutrinos, or the information that it's carrying, all those gates, all those numbers. So where you're highlighted, that's where you can find on the sides of your personality and your design where those numbers lie, and then the meaning of those numbers, that are then we can get into the gene keys, but there's also that element as well that plays into it.
I do see a lot of similarities coming in between astrology and human design. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, so I think astrology, I think it's really dependent on your taste, because I've done astrology. I tried to learn a little bit about it too, but my sacral, or my emotional authority, really didn't keep me going. Like, that joy of learning that really wasn't there for me. So it's essentially, we're all saying the same thing. It's just looking at it through a different lens. I think human design provides a more intricate, a more of like the how than astrology. Astrology feels to me more esoteric, and not very practical in terms of how can it get there? How can this interrelate to this person or that person? So I feel like with astrology, the information, I feel like, does correlate. It's just speaking a different language in a way, but the meaning is the same, or the impressions are the same. And with human design too, it's taking those other modalities as well, and giving you more robust understanding, of who you are as an individual. Because I think when you think of astrology, people kind of think of their sun, their moon, and their ascending sign. I think like, oh, that's who I am. That's my personality. But what about all the unconscious aspects of you? And what about all the other subtleties, especially the way that those energies like to be expressed? Do they like to be expressed in a way of, in a collective manner, like it's meant for storytelling or the masses? Or is it meant more so for you to like integrate, to then lead by example? So I feel like human design is more of that how. The astrology is more of like, here's the big enchilada, here's the big picture.
So far, with my limited understanding of both the fields, what I could really, discern was astrology is more about present and future, And human design, what I felt so far with our discussion and whatever understanding I've been able to build is it's about past and present, understanding us today. Whereas
Yes.
astrology, in most of my conversations so far, I have found it always talks about the future. And so that's a major difference I could see right now. Probably I might be wrong, but yeah, that's what my understanding has been.
No, that's you explain it perfectly. I think astrology as well, it can go into past, but no one really presents that information. So it seems very like this predictive tool of sorts.
Yeah.
Human design can give you that as well because it's using those elements. But it's more so focusing in the here and now, and it really helps because the way that the energies are described, those numbers in your chart, there's shadow frequencies, there's gift frequencies, and there's city frequencies. And so understanding, more of like you're saying, kind of the past, because it is very much contemplative. It's a tool that's what it is. It's a contemplative tool to understanding self. And to self-realizing. So whereas astrology, it's kind of been presented as this, here's what's happening now, in the universe and the cosmos, and here's what's could happen, in the future. Here's this
Yeah.
type of energy that you'll experience in the future, but it's not necessarily telling you the how to that. So you explained it correct. Yeah, I would agree with you there.
Great, great. That's amazing. Um, Now moving on to the second relation I would like to really understand and discuss for our listeners is, and I'd like to start from the aspect of a child when he or she is in the mother's womb. Because you
Mhm.
mentioned that 88 days before the birth, the neutrino starts to have an impression on the DNA of a child or the fetus that's there.
Mhm.
Whatever limited understanding I have about biology and the reproduction system, it is also said that the mother's emotions during that time have a major impact on the child's psychology and the overall growth of the fetus as well. So, can you help
Mhm.
us understand how now
Yeah.
human design really plays a role over here in defining the
Yeah.
DNA of that fetus and the child that's going to be born?
This is a great question. Um, so remember, our human design is our nature. Really, the energy that we're here to express through and to utilize these gifts. Our mother's influence and impact is that nurture element, is that conditioning element. So it's really, it's not necessarily telling you in the womb with the unconscious side to, or the neutrinos that are being imprinted on the DNA. It's not based on the mother's behaviors, stress hormones, things like that. It's two totally different things. So from birth, we are constantly being influenced, or in the womb, we're constantly being conditioned and programmed. And I think that understanding your human design, or understanding these elements to you, and really again self-realizing and bringing the self-awareness in quicker so you can catch yourself, so you don't need to feel the harsh shadow frequencies of these energies, especially from the mother, from her own energies. I feel like it could help the baby tremendously, or being able to have a pregnancy that feels more I don't want to say easeful because trust me, it's not easeful, but just be as cognizant and conscious as possible, and knowing that your influence and the stress levels particularly does have an impact. And if you're able to grasp that and understand that and catch that quicker and shift your mindset, because really it comes down to mindset, and to be able to then have the byproduct be this lessering condition of the shadows from the mothers, I think could be really, really helpful. So there is the mother's just the nurturing side of the human design. It's not the actual nature of the baby or the human.
Amazing. And how does the father's DNA, really impact
Mm.
the fetus and the, again, like mother, we got an understanding. Now, over the child, the father does not really have an impact, except the sperm that's being passed on. So after that, how does the whole father's, human design or DNA really impacts the child's DNA out there?
I think it's the same as the mother's. I think even though we think that the baby is within the mother, and we think that they're so connected, and that there's absolute, it's what's the term I'm looking for? Like it's epigenetics, but it's more so that we think that this baby's going to come out, with our exact genes and our exact DNA and so on and so forth. When in reality, I believe, and I'm not necessarily, a scientist or a neuroscience person, by any means when it relates to this. But I do think that because human design shows you how different you actually are from your parents, granted, you might have energies or elements that have been imprinted on you in specific DNA strands like your parents do, and that gets passed on.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that at the end of the day, like it just shows you how different we are and how everything, that my child, yes, my children are my children, but they, I don't own them. They are their own person, even in their little 5-year-old bodies and 3-year-old bodies. Like they are uniquely different than me. They may have my same hair color and whatnot. And from that aspect of like DNA, sure, yes. But I think from if we're talking about personality wise, and we're talking about just how we're meant to present and express ourselves authentically, they're totally different than me. And I think that we get caught up in that ownership of a child and thinking that, oh, I was, really upset because when I was pregnant with my second, I remember vividly just being so upset and really being in the lull of, kind of this postpartum, because I did have, I got pregnant maybe like 6 or 7 months after my firstborn. And just thinking like, oh, I'm just traumatizing my baby, or I'm just traumatizing my baby. And yes, that may have happened, and there is influence because that happened, and I contribute to that. But at the end of the day, my baby is going to uniquely express themselves, and they're not going to come out because of come out a certain way because of me. Because at the end of the day, this also shows us that we are ultimately in control, and we can shift and kind of reframe or restructure our mindset, which then goes on a cellular level as it relates to DNA. And then so we can talk about epigenetics and all that cool stuff. So yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. Uh, Again, around the first 5, 7 years of a child are the really formative years for, the baby out there. And a lot of things that child learns are from his or her parents, because that's where the baby is spending most of the time. So whatever conversations are happening and what the way parents are behaving, the child starts to reflect on those. Now, one aspect is, yes, I do understand the scientific aspect of the things that comes with it, but bringing to a different point altogether, because I believe that's been a lot of science today we have discussed so far. Um, how, if let's say parents understand their own human design, and at the birth of the child they are able to get access to the human design of the child, so they are aware about this modality, and they go for within the first few, I would say, years of the baby being born, they check out the human design. How can we see a difference in the parenting approach and the individual that's going to be nurtured?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, that this is such a pivotal time. Like the 0 to 7 is very much an impressionable time. They're not necessarily establishing their belief systems yet. They're just observing and absorbing. And if we can be able to go down this very challenging road, yet very rewarding road of self-discovery and understanding, the type, how we're showing up for our children and how we're showing up in a place where we're more accepting, versus being maybe like reactionary or scrutinizing, of our children. Don't do this. You can't do it that way. You have to do it that way. I think is the best gift that you will ever give a child, because you are showing them and modeling them not only your authentic self, but you're allowing them to be their authentic self. Case in point, especially when I was starting to learn this information, being a new mom and just in general having a short fuse and having a short temper, being triggered, by my children, and having a reaction of yelling or telling them they can't do something, and I'm not necessarily totally conscious of even what they're asking me, but I'm quick to just jump down the throat or tell them to be quiet, and not having a reason as to why, because even though they're children, they understand us very much. So I do think that you should always give a why, to everything, even if you think that they don't understand it. I think that being able to catch myself in those moments and being able to collect myself and then going back to my daughter and basically saying, sorry, mommy lashed out, or sorry, I yelled. I should have taken a moment. I should have separated myself. I was feeling a little frustrated. You're also kind of reparenting yourself in live time in that moment. And you're showing them the behavior that it is okay to make mistakes. It is okay to lash out and being able to own those things, because this is also, I feel like, a modality that shows you ownership of all your behaviors, of all your actions. And that's hard sometimes for people to kind of accept, or just to kind of think about it that way, because at the end of the day, all we have are the choices that we make. That's the only thing that we're in control of. And being able to show up in a way where I'm responsive and not reactionary to my kids, I think is the greatest gift. And I think that being able to have our kids kind of see that, and to mimic those behaviors. I see my oldest now talk to the youngest when she blows up at her, and basically comes back and says, "I'm sorry that I yelled." I mean, of course, she didn't give a reason. That's okay. But just to be able to kind of take that accountability, I can already see how this plays into them living in alignment, because if they can take accountability, then they know that they have the ultimate control to be themselves and to make the choices to live out their life.
Amazing, amazing. And can you share some example where you have seen that human design in your experience has really helped parents ease out this whole challenging journey of being a parent a bit somewhere or the other? How does really help them or enable them
Mhm.
in their journey?
Yes. So this one mother, she's a projector, and her child is a generator. And she actually, with a projector style, they're very much, they want to tell people what to do. They want to be able to give advice, and they want to be able to kind of give their opinion unsolicited at times, because they want to be able to use their voice to vocalize what they see, especially if it's defined. So being able to talk to her child in a way that is more so in line to her energetic makeup. She's a generator. As generators and manifesting generators, we like to be asked, to be given options, a lot of yeses and nos, because we respond from our sacral. And being able to address certain situations, especially like if it's cleaning up your room, being able to ask things in question versus being told at or spoken to in a way where it's like, you have to do it this way, or I told you to do X, Y, and Z, you're going to find more resistance. And of course, like as a toddler, when you're getting down to more of like 7, and younger and whatnot, of course they're going to put up hissy fits and whatnot. But when they're a little bit older, and you can cultivate more of a conversation, or have more of a conversation around what your expectation is or what you would like them to do, I think also helps frame that convo in getting the results that you're looking for. So as a projector, instead of speaking at them or giving your advice, waiting for the child to ask you your advice or suggestions, or being recognized, while being able to ask the generator, essentially the yes or no's, to help them navigate quickly, what agreement can be worked out in that as that relates to, again, cleaning the room or helping out with chores, or understanding why you're struggling in school. And also understanding that she has within her or within her generator child, she has what's called gate 20, which is the gate of the now. So it wants to speak and wants to be able to get everything out in the moment, is not really thinking about what it's saying. So understanding that it's nothing personal also, and kind of identifying when that energy is coming through, or just, again, kind of being this repellent of like, I'm not taking this personally. This is how her energy likes to express itself, even when she's telling me no and I'm telling her she has to do it. Like things like that, we can kind of start to work with and play and identify. It doesn't mean that it is the exact answer. It is the exact reason, but it does help get to a solution quicker if we can cross-reference, or kind of eliminate, what we think it isn't versus that it is. So I think that that's really helpful and successful in understanding the energy dynamic play out with the types, particularly if you're a projector and any other type, a manifestor, a generator, or a mani-gen or a reflector.
Lauren, there are so many questions that I have, but yeah, we are more or less nearing the time of our podcast. Um, I guess we would have to do another episode on gene keys and Akashic Records to dive into
Mm-hmm.
them in a lot more deeper sense. But before we wrap this up, any final thoughts on human design for our listeners?
Oh, any final thoughts? I would just say, to be yourself is to know yourself. So to whatever road you decide to go down, whether it is human design or anything else, start that discovery, start that process. So yeah, to try to go down any road that you feel called to. And also, human design is not a tool that boxes you in. It may look like it boxes you in, or that may define you to be a certain way, but know that you are more than that. And you are always expressing yourself throughout different situations, the people that you're around, and that, you are this infinite being of expression, and to play with it. Don't be so serious. Life isn't that serious.
That's so true. And what a message. I really love that. Life is there to have fun and have as many experiences as, one would like. Amazing. Listeners, as we wrap up today's episode, Lauren's insights remind us of the incredible power that lies in understanding ourselves and aligning with our true nature. Whether it is nurturing better relationships, finding clarity and purpose, or achieving success, the journey always begins within. Thank you, Lauren, for sharing these insights and becoming a beacon of light for so many. Thank you.
Thank you, Pulkit. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
And listeners, take a moment today to reflect on what resonates with you. And remember, the seeds we plant today truly shape the garden we walk in tomorrow. We will be mentioning the link to your own human design chart in the description below. Do go out and feel free to book a personalized session with Lauren as well. We will put in a link there for that as well. Thank you.